Hello. Did counsel want to address the court about something?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. So the next witness is Jennifer Jones from the Child Advocacy Center, and we're going to be playing portions of the Argie Children's Child Advocacy Center interviews. Because those interviews involve juveniles, we also would request that that not be live streamed.
I'm happy to hear from, is there a rationale for that, and, you know, other than the fact that they're juveniles?
Well, Your Honor, juvenile witnesses deserve privacy, and their interests in this, we're proceeding through having their interviews, and due to the very strong privacy interests, would outweigh them being displayed through the media. We would just ask that the media be prohibited from live streaming their interviews at the Child Advocacy Center.
Your Honor, the defense agreed to the state.
Okay.
And Your Honor, if we need time to consider this, we can call another witness first, and I apologize for not bringing this up sooner.
Sure. Well, you know, I appreciate the input from both sides. I'm always inclined to maintain an open courtroom. At the very least, I would not allow them to play the video, that maybe it would be the audio. Because the defense does not object, and it appears joins in the request, it certainly potentially can, you know, changes my, thank you, changes in part my analysis, but there's no one here representing the media at this point, so I'm just trying to do the right thing, balancing the rights of the media as it relates to the parties, and particularly the juvenile witnesses in this case.
Your Honor, part of the reasoning for our stipulation to this was to, for Mr. Argie to protect his children. So that's why we strongly agree with the states.
Thank you.
Your Honor, and I'm sorry, maybe I was unclear, and I'd just like to clarify. We're okay with the media playing it, just not hooking in and playing the video for the children. So the media can hear the interviews from the audio, but not connect into the system to actually see the children and hear and identify them.
Okay.
That's fine.
That's great. That's fine.
If I can bring up another matter.
Sure, of course.
Mr. Argie would like to ask the court's permission for the sheriff to switch over to putting him on electronic. What do you call it? That allows him not to be shackled downstairs.
Oh.
Any objection from the court?
No. You know, I don't object, but I also don't direct. It's
Right. Apparently, as long as there's no objection or whatnot, the sheriff can go ahead and do what they can do.
Sure. That I leave it to
Right,
their discretion. Thank you. Okay. Are we all ready to have then the jury brought back in?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you. Do you want me to? I'll leave.
All right.
You don't have to. Thank you.
Judge adjourn, please. be seated.
Thank you, Honor. The state calls Jennifer Jones to the stand.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. Once you're settled in the chair and close enough to the microphone, if you could state your full name for our court reporter and spell your last name.
Sure. My name is Jennifer Jones, Jones.
And Ms. Jones, because you're wearing a mask, please recall that your voice isn't going to project the same way, so I'm going to need for you to be much stronger in your presentation so that
Sure.
everybody in the courtroom can hear.
Sure. No
Thank
problem.
you.
Yep.
Good morning, Ms. Jones.
Good morning.
Are you currently employed?
I am.
Where are you employed?
I work at the Child Advocacy Center out of Hillsborough County. I'm in the Nashua Center.
Can you please tell the jury what the Child Advocacy Center is?
So a Child Advocacy Center is a place where children and families can attend a scheduled appointment for the purposes of a child having or participating in a child forensic interview.
How long have you worked at the Child Advocacy Center?
So I've been there 10 years.
And what is your current role?
I am the program coordinator and the primary child forensic interviewer.
I'd like to direct your attention to April 2019. You worked at the Child Advocacy Center at that time?
Yes, I did.
And what was your role at that time?
Same as my current role, the child forensic interviewer, program coordinator.
About how many children interviews have you been the interviewer for?
So I've seen approximately 1,650 to approximately 1,750 children at the center.
Do you have training in interviewing children?
I do. I have numerous specialized trainings in interviewing children.
Can you explain for the jury just generally how you start an interview with a child?
Yeah, so typically, we're going to acclimate the child to the room. I'm going to explain my role, and that my role is to talk to children, and that the most important part of my role is to listen. And so I'm going to point out that there's a camera in the room and that the conversation is recorded. I'm going to spend some time asking the child questions about themselves, and that's a really great way for me to start to get to know a bit about the child in terms of just a neutral conversation and sort of get a feel for how they, what their receptive language is, how they understand my questions and how they'll respond, and then we transition to topic.
Do you review with children that you interview anything regarding truthfulness?
We do. Yep, we certainly talk with children about the importance of only talking about things that they really know and really know about.
And I believe you already said this, but are the interviews with children at the Child Advocacy Center recorded?
They are always video and audio recorded.
Now I'd like to direct your attention specifically to April 5th, 2019. Do you recall interviewing Ella Argie and Gavin Argie on that date?
I did interview both children.
Can you describe what Gavin and Ella's relationship is to one another?
They are siblings, brother and sister.
And I'm sorry to be repetitive, but were your interviews with Gavin and Ella Argie recorded?
Both interviews were video and audio recorded, yes.
Were copies of those recorded interviews provided to the police?
Yes, they were.
And prior to today, did you have an opportunity to review portions of those interviews?
Yes, I did.
If I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 41. Do you recognize the CD?
I do.
How do you recognize that?
That was the CD sent to me for review, and then you can see that I initialed it.
Okay, and these initials indicate that you viewed this portion, these portions of the interviews?
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So now we're going to play portions of the interviews that you reviewed from Exhibit 41. If I could just ask the court if you could just turn the lights down a little bit to make sure it's clear. So first we're going to play a portion of Ella Argie's interview. It's about 10 minutes long. Oh, and before we hit play, I apologize. Also, so this that we're about to view will also have the transcript beneath it, as you can see here, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I'm asking you to promise to tell the truth with me. Do you agree to do that? I agree. All right, so tell me about, you talk about having breakfast and you say, I don't remember what you had, but you remember, you and your brother had breakfast, you said, Mom was there, was Dad there? That morning? Okay. Actually, yeah, I'm not sure. My dad doesn't have a job, even my mom only gets paid. How about on that Wednesday, the day that you tell me that you have your instrument or you have piano, and it was school that day? What are you telling me when you have? Yeah. Yeah, okay, and how'd you get there? Who brought you? Take the bus, okay. Do you have a bus stop or something else? Wait, your house, okay, does anyone live with you? My little brother. Okay, was anyone waiting for you at the door, at the door on Wednesday morning? No, my dad brought me. Your dad what? My dad brought me. Oh, dad brought you on the bus. Okay, all right. And so then you said you go to school that day. How about after school? How do you, or what do you do after school? I don't know. I went there. Okay. And did your parents pick you up that day on Wednesday? You're nodding. Or something? Yes. And was it mom and dad, or just dad, or just mom, or? Who picked you up on Wednesday? Can't remember. Okay. I think it was mom. It was mom. Okay. How about that night? Did you stay, or what? Or where did you stay that night? I went at my regular house. Regular house. So when you say regular house, you're talking about the one. Which one is that? Yeah, that's okay. You told me, and I think I asked you this already, but I'm sorry, I forgot. What did your house say? My family house, but okay. We went to one. Okay. So the house that you have, so the house, your family's house. And so, and did you go to piano on Wednesday? Yeah, so glad to get this because I was sitting till my dad said, you know what, we're not going to be alone. I'm like, why? He's like, I'm not so big. Okay. But this week you did? Yeah. Yeah, and how did you get to the piano? Did both dad and mom or something else? This one. Who brought you on Wednesday? My dad. Yeah, okay. And did dad also bring you home from piano or something else? Yeah. Okay. When you got home from piano, was mom home? Well, no, because my mom was with my nana and she had got on Wednesday. Okay. And when she got home, did you see her? Yeah. Okay. And what time do you go to bed? When you're at bed on the weekend, I can stay until midnight. you actually go in on Thursday morning to their bedroom? Tell me everything about going into the bedroom. Well, did you see Mom? What did you see? No. Okay. Did you like talk to her? No. Did you? Okay. You said hi, Mom, and when you said you saw her, like where in the room was she? She was in bed. Okay. And what helped you to know she was in the bed? Thank you for telling me. I need to ask them a different way. So did you actually see her in the bed? Okay, what did you see? Well, she wasn't really awake. She was just like that. So like that. I think she might have heard me. She was like, hi, Mom. Okay. So like, let's go. I'm ready for the day. Okay. And did Mom say anything back or? She was asleep. Okay. So was she like, when you said it that, was she like over her covers or under her covers or? I just said, well, her hair is a certain color. I don't people telling it because some people, her hair used to be black, but now it's like, it's kind of gray, and I like it gray because when she irons her hair, it kind of turns more gold. Like, you know, those she irons, my mom's and I would try. So that morning on Thursday, when you went in and said, hi, Mom, I'm ready for the day, were you able to see, like, her hair? Well, you're describing her hair. No, she was like, her hair kind of blended in with the colors. Oh. Because it's gray, white, and they're the board colors. Okay. Okay. Mine have a pink. Yours is colorful? And like a little case. Hall kitty. Okay. So if I'm understanding this right, you said you did go in to see Mom, but she was sleeping. Yeah. And you said Dad said something about you guys going in to see her. Tell me about that again. What did he say? He said, why do you wake up, Mom? And I'm like, she's off so late. What did he seem like? Was he like happy, sad, mad, or something different when he said that? He was like, really, Ella? Really? Which is like, at this age is like, did you really have to do that? Okay. And you said Dad told your Mom was sick. Did you say, like, what was wrong? Like, so when the old goes on, which apparently he has to do, you can't just fall asleep and, What did he say to you when you were there? That Mom was sick and no one was, he's like, don't touch her. And I'm like, okay. Has he ever said something like that to you before? Like, don't put your touch her or something? All right. Did he say why he didn't want you to touch her? What did he tell me when you got like that? No. Okay. All right. And so you said, after that, Dad said, don't go in, she's sick. And then do you go to school on Thursday? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. And did you see Mom after that? Yeah, I picture that. Okay. And right now, I've been, we were here the Thursday, Friday, like, oh, okay. So everybody's already in the morning.
Okay. So at this point, I'm just going to ask you, can you please just identify who we're seeing? We'll start with right here. Who is in that seat?
That is Ella Argie.
And who are we seeing here?
That is a very pregnant me.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So you testified that you also interviewed Ella's brother, Gavin Argie, right?
I did.
Okay. And at this point, we're now going to play a portion of Gavin Argie's interview, and it's about 11 minutes long. We'll just take one moment to get that up on the screen.
Okay. And when you say your dad told you your mom was sick, how did he tell you that? Like, did you see him, or did he talk to you on the phone, or something else?
He talked to me and we got up, and we had to be quiet because she was sleeping.
Okay. He talked to you when you got up when? Which day? The Wednesday, yeah, it said that sleeping. And then did you find it?
Yeah, because she was sick.
She was sick. Okay. And so, and I just want to make sure I know what morning that was. So that was the morning that you went to the YMCA later that day and had PE? Okay. All right. So Jeff said, Mom's sleeping, to be quiet, she's sick. And then you go to school and do all those things, and you said, Mimi picked you up? Okay. And then, the day Mimi picked you up? On the Wednesday? Do you go home after that or something different?
I go home.
You are?
Wednesday, we go to piano here. My sister to be a good, piano player.
Okay. And so, who goes to piano when you say we go?
My sister, and maybe my mom or my dad takes her, or my baby. I love reading.
Do you go to piano also?
But sometimes I'll like Jones.
How about that day on the Wednesday that Mimi picks you up from the YMCA? Do you go to piano with your sister or something else?
Oh, I don't think one day.
I would hear you.
Only when we go to piano.
Okay. All right. And so tell me about after piano. Where do you go? Okay. Home, like where you live, where mom and dad are? Tell me everything about getting home. Well, actually, you know, let me ask this first. Who brought you home after piano?
My mom and
How about on that Wednesday, the day you had PE at the YMCA and you picked you up? Who brought you home from piano that day? Yeah. Okay. Tell me about when you got home. Who was there?
my mom. I made dinner.
I couldn't hear your words. Did
And she
you
made dinner.
She made dinner. What did she make?
What she made.
That's okay if you don't remember. And so who had dinner?
Me and my sister.
You and your sister. How about mom or dad did they eat?
They always eat food. And then
They eat when you're in bed. Okay. And tell me about that night. Like what do you usually do at night?
and we get time so it's then we go to bed.
Okay. And on that night, the night that you came home from piano, you went to YMCA, you went to PE that day, did anyone do you on that night?
Again,
Yeah. Where was mom?
downstairs watching TV.
Downstairs watching TV. Okay, so dad reads the TV and then what?
Then he goes downstairs, he looks for the voices, and then he goes downstairs and he shuts off the light and pushes the light.
Okay. Okay. And you and your sister go to bed at the same time or something different?
Same time or sometimes she was first.
Okay. And so, I bet that you're going to say something. Okay. So that night when you go to bed after dad reads you the story, does like mom talk to you any at all? Or
Sometimes my dad takes me and mom or my mom.
okay. All right. Do you need to use the bathroom? No? Or do you need anything? Okay, I just wanted to check if you stood up, so I wanted to make sure you. And so tell me about, so after you have your story, you go to bed, tell me about like that night. Do you sleep through the whole night or does anything wake you up?
sometimes I wonder if I transform our watches and you go back and go back.
You do, I'm glad you told me. Well, let's take it out and read. No, you don't need to. I think it's a little silly, but I just turned my thinking a little bit. I don't want to be old when you're in there with me. And you were right like that. Do what you did just now and say, I gotta go potty, I need to use the bathroom. So I want to make sure you're comfortable in your room, okay? So you just told me, oh, sorry, I can't move here. You just told me all about this day on Wednesday. And let me know that you was bed that night. And I have to, you got to sleep for a little later. Anything woke you up. Sometimes you guys use the, what was it, the iPad? Did I get that right?
Or sometimes a computer, a watch.
Okay. How about that night? Did you go right to sleep or did you get deep sleep? Got it. Okay. All right. Okay. So did anything wake you up after you went to bed? Like sounds or noises or anything else? Or someone coming in the room, anything? Like you remember? What did he show you or tell you? Yeah. No? Okay. Well then, how about when you woke up in the morning? The next day was Thursday. Tell me everything about when you woke up.
Actually, I got picked up on this day.
You got picked up on that day?
When you're baby.
With your meeting? Did I write it in the wrong spot? You are really good at telling me when I make a mistake. Thank you. Can I wrap this out? All right. I'm working here. Okay. All right. So how about that morning you told me on this night on Wednesday you slept at your house? So when you woke up at your house on Thursday, how many hours did you have? Can't remember. Okay. Did you see anyone that day?
My sister, including just my and my auntie.
Your sister, Gracie, Justin, and your auntie, did you see them at your house or something different?
At this hotel.
Oh, at the hotel. How about when you woke up at your house? Did you see them? Or did anyone help you get ready, or did you go to school that day on Thursday? What are you telling me? No? Okay. In the morning, you said you got, or help me understand better. Do you leave your house that day on Thursday?
We were still at the hotel. And then we went down, and then we went for breakfast, and then we came home, back to the hotel, and then we had something to put in, and then we went to the pool.
Okay, all right. And so, who decided that you were going to go out to the hotel that day on Thursday?
My auntie just did, and I went to.
Okay. Okay, did you like to talk to anybody, like your sister or your mother, or I'm sorry, your sister or your mom or dad about it?
No,
Okay.
my mom and dad weren't there.
Oh, they weren't there. Okay, that lets me understand better. Where were they?
My mom was just listening to see my dad at the meeting.
Oh, okay. All right. So did your mom was sick and she had to stay home? Who told your mom was sick?
Dad,
Oh, yeah, okay. What did he say?
be quiet this week. Because
And did you get to see your mom when she was not feeling good or sick?
when he done,
We are almost done. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you told me.
because when she only couldn't feel the chip.
Okay. Who told you you couldn't be able to?
My dad.
Oh, yeah, okay. What did you say about that?
Can't remember really.
Okay, and now again,
That's Gavin Argie.
Okay, and again, it states Exhibit 41. Who are we seeing right here in this seat doing the interview?
That is me.
If I may just have one moment. And I have no further questions for you at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any cross-examination? No. Okay, and may this witness be excused by both sides?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
You can step down, you can stay or leave as you choose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, if I may just have one moment. Before
Of course.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Sure.
Makes and keeps records pertaining to online signups entered using its software. Those records contain such information as the time and date in Eastern Standard Time when the signup was entered, the IP address indicating from where the signup was entered, and any email address and name provided by the person entering the signup. The attached records are for a sign-up entered on April 3rd, 2019 to https://www.signup.genius.com/go/8050C4FA5A E2AA1FE3-AFC urgent. The information contained in the records was collected and recorded in the usual course of the regularly conducted business activity of Sign Up Genius, Inc., and was made by the regularly conducted activity as a regular practice. The information contained in the records was generated at the time when the sign-up was entered by the sender and was generated electronically and contemporaneously with the sign-up entry. The attached records are true and accurate copies of original records and true and accurate copies of information contained in records maintained by Sign Up Genius, Inc., as made at the time of the occurrence of events reflected in those records, as a matter of course, when such records are made and kept in the usual course of business of Sign Up Genius, Inc., as a regularly conducted activity and practice. And the record reads for Sign Up Genius, the IP address of the person that signed up using me4pa@comcast.net is 73.89.67.158. The timestamp associated with this sign up is 4/3/2019, 10:28 p.m. EDT. The email address me4pa@comcast.net does not have a full account created with our site. And at this time, the state calls David Adams to the stand. And again, just for the record, that was State's Exhibit 7.
Thank you. Good morning, sir. If you could raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. And once you're comfortable in that chair and close enough to the microphone, if you could provide your full name for the court reporter and spell your last name.
My name is David G. Adams, A-D-A-M-S.
And Mr. Adams, I'll just remind you that because of the mask, our voices aren't projecting as much, so if you could keep your voice a little bit louder than you normally would.
Understood.
Thank you. Counsel?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Mr. Adams, are you currently employed?
Yes.
Where are you employed?
I own and operate a series of urgent care walk-in medical clinics in Massachusetts.
And what is the name of those walk-in clinics?
They operate under the American Family Care brand, AFC Urgent Care.
Mr. Adams, how long have you been in the field of managing these types of companies?
About 10 years.
I'd like to direct your attention to March 2019. During that time frame, was your business expanding to include the operation and management of pre-existing clinics in North Andover and Methuen, Massachusetts?
Yes.
What was the plan for staff and providers of these two pre-existing clinics?
My clinics were going to take over the operation of those two clinics in North Andover and Methuen starting on June 1st, and in order to do June 1st of 2019. And in order to do that, we needed to hire and staff with existing staff who worked at the Methuen and North Andover clinics as of March and April of 2019.
So was your plan to automatically rehire everyone, or did you have a different plan?
Automatically rehired, no. We were going to host a series of orientations, get to know the staff and see who wanted to work and who didn't, and then make our decisions.
Okay. Are you familiar with Jody Marazzi, formerly Jody Johnson?
Yes.
How are you familiar with her?
She was one of our employees. Several months prior to March and April of 2019, she left those two clinics and came to work with us.
And in 2019, was she a manager for you?
For one of our several locations.
What about Sarah Lemeries? Are you familiar with Sarah Lemeries?
I've met Sarah. Sarah was, I believe, the operations manager of the clinics in North Andover and Methuen at the time.
Okay. In March 2019, when you were beginning this process, what did your company do to begin meeting the providers at the Methuen and North Andover clinics?
We set up a meeting. The owners of the clinics in Methuen and North Andover agreed to close their clinics early on Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019, so that we could host a meet and greet. We could introduce ourselves to the team, to the existing staff, and we could share with them a little bit about our approach to healthcare and the game plan for moving forward as of June 1st of 2019 to operate those clinics.
Okay, and I'm sorry, before we get into that specific meeting that you're talking about, in March 2019, did your company host a dinner?
We did. We hosted, we called it a leadership dinner with our provider team in Massachusetts.
Okay.
We invited the provider team from the Methuen and North Andover clinics.
And then you said now, moving on to April 2019, April 2nd, 2019. Were you in Methuen on that date?
Yes, that's where we hosted the meeting that evening.
Okay, so on April 2nd, 2019, you hosted a meeting in Methuen with providers. And what was the substance of what was discussed at that meeting?
Sure. We met in they have a large conference room in the facility, and we met with just the provider team. Just providers are physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician's assistants, so licensed practitioners. We met with them for about an hour and explained our approach, and immediately following we met with the broader staff. The providers stayed, and we met with all of the medical assistants and x-ray staff, x-ray techs and nurses outside in the lobby.
On April 2nd, 2019, when you were holding that meeting, was William Argie in attendance?
He was.
Can you please describe for the jury your observations of William Argie on that night?
Sure. He came into the meeting late, and I later learned that it's because he was treating a patient who was in the clinic. I didn't know that at the time, so I thought it was unusual that someone would come to a mandatory, important meeting about the future of their employment late. When he did join, he stood by the door in the back of the room, probably for about an hour while we were there meeting with the providers. He didn't speak or engage. He was wearing a dark hoodie with the hood up. And so the general impression was that certainly wasn't making strides to impress a future employer.
So, Mr. Adams, you said you've been in this field for about 10 years. Based on your experience working with providers, was Mr. Argie's appearance and behavior typical at these types of meetings?
It was very casual, and it was not particularly professional. But again, it wasn't a formal interview. It was a meet and greet. It was just an unusual appearance.
And did Mr. Argie attend the dinner that you hosted for providers back in March 2019?
I don't think he did.
All right, so now I'd like to direct your attention to April 3rd, the day after that in-person meeting that you had with the providers. Do you recall what you did in order to advance that rehiring process?
Sure, we drafted an email to send out to all staff, providers, and line staff, x-ray techs, medical assistants, et cetera. And I sent it out that evening, asking everyone to sign up for an individual online sign-up Genius, a web-based sign-up platform for meetings. And I sent the link out asking everyone to sign up for their first of 2 orientation sessions. It would be each provider would have a 2-hour sit down with our medical director and with me and with our operations director to get to know them, to walk through the details of benefits, et cetera. And so I sent that out on the evening of April 3rd via email to probably about 40 people, to include the defendant.
So when somebody actually signed up using Sign Up Genius, were you notified?
I would get an email from the Sign Up Genius platform telling me who signed up for what time.
Would the email be sent to you from a Sign Up Genius email account?
Yes.
And I believe this screen is off, so if I just may have one moment. Okay. So that meeting we were discussing that you had was on April 2nd.
Sure.
If my counsel could just click, please. And now this Sign Up Genius email that you sent out asking people to sign up for these 2-hour blocks was right here on Wednesday, the evening of Wednesday, April 3rd.
I sent it out about 8:30 p.m. on Wednesday the 3rd.
Okay. And do you recall whether you received an email from Sign Up Genius notifying you that someone signed up representing themselves as William Argie?
I did. It was the same evening. It was actually the first spot taken. The first person to sign up was Mr. Argie, who signed up for a 2-hour orientation on April 23rd with us. I received that email from Sign Up Genius around 10:30 p.m. That evening of Wednesday, April 3rd.
Mr. Adams, when asked, did you provide that notification email to the police?
I did.
Okay, thank you. If I may just have one moment. I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Did the meeting on April 2nd include per diem employees?
My organization has never employed per diem employees. We were speaking with existing employees of another organization, and so I can't answer whether or not they were employed as, I'm sure there were full-time and part-time people there. I don't know if there were per diem people there. There may have been.
Okay, so you invited all employees, whether they're per diem or not, from the previous organization?
That's right. I left it to the existing owners and operators of those clinics to invite those that they thought would be appropriate.
Okay.
But we had no interest in hiring per diem. We were only looking for full-time and part-time employees.
And prior to, so you had that meeting on April 2nd. Before you sent out the sign-up Genius invitation, did you receive an email from Bill Argie?
A recruiter had contacted me in years or many months before with his resume, but I had never communicated directly with Mr. Argie to my knowledge.
Okay. I guess I'm just, did you know that Jody Johnson knew of Mr. Argie?
She worked formerly at those clinics, so I was aware that she knew their team, yes.
Okay,
Not
and
Mr.
she did not
Argie's.
reach out to you before the sign-out genius?
Not to my recollection.
Is it uncommon for people who are looking for a more secure employment to be eager about securing employment?
I think, I don't understand your question.
Is it unusual for someone who's looking for a secure, permanent position to be, and is not have one, to be eager about getting one?
I think it's typical that people who want to work will look for a job.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, and may Mr. Adams be excused by both sides?
Yes, thank you.
Attorney Nye, you're all set?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
sir, you can step down, you can stay or leave as you choose. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron, appreciate it.
State next call, Bob Corenti.
Morning, sir. If you don't mind raising your right hand, I'll swear you in. Once you want to put down your book and your keys. Okay. Thanks a lot. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Have a seat. Once you get close enough to the microphone and state, if you could, state your full name for the court reporter and spell your last name.
My name is Robert M. Correnti, Correnti.
And Mr. Corenti, if you could just remember that we're all wearing masks, so our voices aren't projecting quite the same way. If you could try to keep your voice up for us, okay?
Surely.
Thanks a lot.
Yes,
Counsel.
sir. Sir. Where do you work and what is your position?
I work, I'm the executive director of the Billerica Housing Authority.
And for about how long have you been executive director of the Billerica Housing Authority? About?
I began working there in August of 2015.
In 2019, did you know?
No, 15.
Yep, but I'm directing your attention to 2019. Then, did you know Maureen Argie?
Yes, she was employed by Elder Services as the Residence Services Coordinator there. And when I joined, she was there, yes.
For about how long had you worked with Maureen? About?
I worked with her until April.
How many years prior had you worked for her or with her?
Since 2015.
What was your position in relation to Maureen's position?
I'm the executive director of the Housing Authority, which houses elderly and non-elderly disabled folks. And she did not report directly to me. She was employed by Elder Services with a contract with the Housing Authority, where she worked there 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, providing services and a resource to the residents.
So how often would you interact with Maureen at work, and how would those interactions take place?
Constantly. She was an integral part of the of the team. Very, very involved with the residents, I mean, in my 50-plus years of senior management, I probably could say there's a handful of people whose skills and background and you know, matched perfectly the job, and she was one of them. And she was a tremendous resource to the residents, providing assistance with things like Medicare, insurance, things like that. And also, you know, if a resident needed home health care workers, assistance along those lines, she would get involved with that. And but she was very compassionate. She didn't wait for it to happen. She would, you know, she would sense and see that a resident was on a journey or going down a road where they needed assistance. And then she would follow up if that assistance was provided to ensure that it was, you know, meeting the needs of the residents.
Based on your own interactions with Maureen, what you saw, did she appear to enjoy her job?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Did she appear to enjoy her work?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. She was always coming in with the same attitude, very caring attitude, and was, you know, always the same pleasant personality, and very, you know, she's very warm, and you know, she conducted herself to the highest standards.
So on the screen, I don't know if you can see this, this is State's Exhibit 93. It's a calendar. Can you see that, sir?
Yes.
And I want to direct your attention to the week of April 1st. Did you see Maureen that week?
Yes.
And when did you last see Maureen?
As I indicated, she would work for us Tuesdays and Thursdays, so it would have been the Tuesday or Thursday before her passing.
Okay. Do you remember speaking to investigators about the case?
Yes.
Okay. So give me 1 second, and I could be wrong. This will be the first time.
Excuse me.
Council 154. So I'm showing you a copy of a report taken of an interview conducted with you by investigators.
Yes.
According to that report, it says that you last saw Maureen on Wednesday, April 3rd. Would you care to review that and see if that may refresh your recollection and you may be mistaken?
That would be correct. This would be correct.
Would you like, if you don't mind reviewing the report?
You want me to read the whole report?
Yep.
To yourself.
Oh. Yes.
So reviewing that report, does it appear that it was actually April 3rd when you last saw Maureen?
Yes, correct.
When you saw her on April 3rd, was there anything unusual about her appearance that you remember?
No.
Did she look sick? Did she complain of any illness that you recall?
No. No.
Did she indicate that she may take time off later in the week?
No.
Turning to the next day, sir, Thursday, April 4th, did you see Maureen that day?
No.
Okay, and sir, I do need to take the report back. We do have rules that you need to testify based on your memory. If your memory needs refreshing, I can certainly give you this document, but you can't be looking at the document. Does that make sense?
That makes sense?
Great. So Thursday, April 4th, Maureen didn't show up at work?
Correct.
To your knowledge, was anyone notified that Maureen would not be showing up to work on Thursday?
No. No one was notified.
Was that unusual?
Absolutely
For Maureen
unusual.
not to show up at work?
It was unusual, and because it was so unusual, I recall, calling her cell phone, and because she wasn't there, and didn't know if she, got into a car accident or, her kids were sick or something like that. So I had called her cell phone. I believe I left a message on her cell phone, suggesting that she, give a call or if she needed anything, something like that.
I'll agree to move to strike that portion of the witness.
I'm sorry?
Answer. That was non-responsive, Judge.
Okay, thank you. Well, he was explaining the reasons why he called her cell phone, so I'm going to allow it. It was the reasons.
There's a fair amount of speculation, but
Yeah, it was his own speculation, so, thank you.
When you attempted to call Maureen, were you able to get a hold of her? Sir?
No.
Thank you. No further questions. Counsel may have some for you, though.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You said you worked with Maureen for 4 years?
I would say about approximately,
2015 to 2019?
yes.
And she worked at the Billerica location 2 days a week, you said?
Correct.
And you would see her just about every day that she worked?
Absolutely, yes. She was an important part of the team providing services to the residents, and we would have interaction constantly on the days she was there.
Okay, constant interactions. But this was a professional relationship?
Yeah, yes.
You didn't know much about her private life?
No, Maureen's a very private person.
She's very private. So she didn't talk to you about her home life?
Nope,
That's
no,
okay. She never, you never met her husband, Bill?
nope.
You never met her kids?
I'm sorry?
You never met her children?
Oh, no, I did meet her children. She would occasionally bring them in. We would have different events. Some of the events that she organized for the residents, if the kids weren't in school, she would bring them, and she had posters on her in her office from the kids drawing. So I knew she had 2 kids, and met the boy and the girl when they were in the office. And,
Okay. And you said she did not have any plans to take time off of work later in that week in April?
no, if she were, she would have said something to me.
Okay.
And again, that's why I called that day when she wasn't in, because that was so unusual.
And you didn't know that she was moving out of her home?
No,
She didn't discuss that with you?
nope.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
No, may this witness be released?
Any objection from the defense?
No objection.
Okay, sir, you can step down. You can stay or leave as you choose. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Judge, before we call the next witness, there is another record certification. This is from State's Exhibit 5. This is for St. Mary's Bank. I, Victoria Martell, am the designated custodian records for St. Mary's Bank. All the records produced in response to the attached subpoena are all records of the regularly conducted business activity of St. Mary's Bank. The records were made at or near the time of occurrence of the matter set forth by or from information transmitted by a person with knowledge of those matters. The records were kept in the course of the regularly conducted activity and were made by the regularly conducted activity as a regular practice of St. Mary's Bank. And that, again, is State's Exhibit 5, and the state does call Matthew Amatucci at this time.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. And once you're settled in your chair, close enough to that microphone, please state your full name and spell your last name for our court reporter.
Yes, it's Matthew Amatucci, Amatucci.
And sir, just recall that because you're wearing a mask, your voice is not projecting the way it normally would, so if you could project more than you would normally.
Yes.
Thank you.
Where do you work?
I work for the New Hampshire State Police Major Crime Unit
And for about how long have you been assigned to the Major Crime Unit?
in my 7th year now.
I want to turn your attention to the afternoon of April 5th of 2019. Did you have an opportunity to speak with William Argie?
I did.
And you see Mr. Argie here in the courthouse.
I do.
And can you point him out for us?
Yeah, he's wearing the suit and tie.
And the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant?
It will.
Where was it that you encountered the defendant?
At the Bacchus Hospital down in Norwich, Connecticut.
And how did you introduce yourself to the defendant?
I introduced myself by name. I informed him that I was a sergeant with the New Hampshire State Police.
When you first met with the defendant, did you tell him that his wife was dead?
I did.
And what was the defendant's reaction when you told him that his wife was dead?
There was no verbal or emotional response. He just looked at me with really no response at all.
Did you then seek to interview the defendant about his wife's death?
I did.
Before proceeding with that interview, did you ask the defendant for his permission to record that interview?
Yes, I did.
Did the defendant agree to have the interview recorded?
Yes, he did.
And did you in fact record that interview?
Yes.
And how did you record it?
I used a Sony digital recorder.
And is that standard practice to record interviews whenever possible?
Yes, it is.
Now, in addition to audio recording your interview with the defendant, did you also prepare a report detailing somewhat what the defendant said during the course of that interview?
Yes, I did.
Now, you said that the interview happened at, I believe you said Bacchus Hospital?
Yes.
Where specifically inside the hospital did that interview occur?
There was a small private room located at the end of a hallway, on the right-hand side of the end of the hallway.
Who was present during that interview?
William Argie, and then Trooper First Class Stephen Sloper.
And with respect to Stephen Sloper, that's another investigator from the Major Crime Unit?
Yes.
And again, is that standard practice to have at least 2 investigators whenever possible participate in an interview?
Yes.
Before conducting the actual interview, did you inform the defendant, Mr. Argie, whether he was under arrest?
I did. I informed him that he was not under arrest.
He was not under arrest.
Correct.
Before conducting the actual interview, did you advise the defendant of his so-called Miranda rights?
I did.
And if you can explain for the jurors what in substance the Miranda rights are that you provided to the defendant.
Yes. I used a form, a standard form that we use. He had the right to remain silent. Anything that he said could and would be used against him in the court. That he had the right to an attorney. If he couldn't afford an attorney, one be afforded to him. And if he decided to answer any questions without an attorney, he had the right to stop answering at any time.
Now, if you can explain to the jurors why you told the defendant he was not under arrest, and yet you advised him of his Miranda rights.
Yes. Depending on how the individual we're going to speak with perceives whether they are in custody, determines whether we're going to read them their rights. So in this particular case, if they're going to perceive that they're in custody, that they're not free to leave, and we are going to ask incriminating questions, questions that could elicit response that they had done something, we will advise them of their rights. And in this particular case, he had been transported to the hospital in a police car. He was not free to leave the hospital due to medical reasons. And although he wasn't in custody, I was also going to be asking him questions related to the death of his wife, which potentially could elicit an incriminating response.
The information that you just relayed to the jurors, that he was transferred into the hospital by the police and that he was not free to leave, was that information that was relayed to you?
It was.
Did the defendant agree to speak with you after you advised him of his Miranda rights?
Yes, he did.
About what time of day did that interview with the defendant occur?
It was about 4:30, a little after 4:30 PM.
And did the defendant appear alert during that interview?
He did.
During your interactions with the defendant, did he appear medicated?
He did not.
When the defendant spoke to you, was he coherent?
He was.
About how long did your interview with the defendant last? Again, about.
About an hour and 15 minutes.
Did the defendant ask his own questions during the course of that interview?
He did.
At any point during that over about an hour or so when the defendant spoke with you, did he ever ask what happened to his wife?
He did not.
Now, I want to talk to you about a few specific topics that the defendant spoke to you about. First, your encounter with the defendant occurred in Connecticut. Did the defendant explain how he got to Connecticut?
Yes, he had stated that he had driven his wife's Murano down to Connecticut.
And are you familiar with the general appearance of such a vehicle?
I am.
I want to show you a slide. I don't know if you can see it from where you are, but you've seen this photograph before, right?
Yes.
And for the record, this is State's Exhibit 30. And again, the vehicle in the image is dark, but you actually saw not only the still before, but the video from which it was taken.
Correct.
Is the vehicle in this still consistent in appearance to the vehicle that the defendant said he drove to Connecticut in?
Yes, it is.
About how long of a drive is it from Londonderry, New Hampshire to Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut?
It's about 2 hours.
And how did you get to Connecticut where you encountered the defendant and spoke to him?
I drove my cruiser down there.
Did you return to New Hampshire by car as well?
I did.
In those rides to and from Connecticut, were you able to use your cell phone, for example, to make calls, to receive text messages?
Yes.
Was another of the general topic areas that you spoke to the defendant about his employment history?
Yes.
And what did the defendant say he did for work?
He stated that he was a physician assistant. He had been doing that for about 16 years.
And did the defendant go into his educational history, how he came to be a physician's assistant?
Yes.
And what do you remember about the defendant telling you about that subject?
That he had gone to college down in Tennessee.
Did the defendant talk about how much money he had been making as a physician's assistant up until about the past previous years?
Yes. He stated that when he initially started, he was making about $60,000 a year, and then his last full year of employment, he had made about $175,000.
But again, that was something years previously?
Yes.
To when he spoke to you?
Correct.
What about more recently in relation to his wife's death? What was the defendant's employment status at that time from what he told you?
He stated that he's working per diem in an urgent care, AFC urgent care, down in Methuen, North Andover, Massachusetts.
And are you familiar with the phrase per diem?
Yes.
And what does that mean?
Essentially, he'll work whenever he's required to work. If they need coverage on specific shifts, he'll come in and cover shifts, but it's not steady employment.
Lastly, on the defendant's employment, did he talk about a career change that he had been contemplating?
Yes. He stated that he was interested in going back to law school.
So the defendant talked to you about issues with employment, that he was doing work as a per diem. Did he discuss particular financial problems that he was experiencing?
Yes.
And what do you recall the defendant saying about that subject?
They were going to be in the process of selling their house. He was having a difficult time making his truck payment. He had a $610 truck payment that he was delinquent on. He had received calls from creditors because he was delinquent.
In addition to working only as a per diem, debt issues that he discussed with you, what else was contributing to the defendant's financial difficulties from what he told you during the course of this interview?
Gambling.
And did the defendant discuss what, if any, effect the gambling had on his marriage?
Yes. It was certainly a strain on his marriage, and they were having marital difficulties due to his gambling because his wife did not like his gambling.
According to what the defendant told you, about how long had he realized that his gambling was causing issues with his marriage?
The last few years.
What did the defendant talk to you about in terms of the extent of his gambling issues that you recall?
He was going to Gamblers Anonymous because he was having issues. He had stated that when he first got out of school, he was making about $60,000 a year. When he had purchased his house, he was making about $70,000 a year. And when he got to the point where he was making $175,000 a year, if he were to lose $30,000 to $40,000 in a year, he viewed that as he was still ahead. He was having difficulties with his truck payment. He was having difficulty paying bills.
Did he tell you what he'd done with one of his truck payments that or what he was supposed to do with respect to a truck payment?
Yes. He had gone to a casino and lost that money.
So the defendant spoke to you about his employment history. He shared with you details about his gambling issues, his financial hardship, his marital issues. With respect to marital issues, did you ask him about his relationship with his wife?
I did.
And he spoke to you about this, his marital issues with his wife?
Yes.
For about how long did he say he had been having marital issues?
Since 2015, 2016.
According to the defendant, who had discussed or who had been discussing divorce?
Initially, he had brought up divorce back in 2015, 2016. They seemingly had worked through those issues, and more recently, Maureen had brought up that she wanted a divorce.
Now, you testified that one of the topics that the defendant discussed during your interview with him was employment difficulties that he was having, the per diem work. As part of other work that you did in this investigation, did you contact a person by the name of Sarah Lemeries?
Yes, I did.
And how did you contact Sarah Lemeries?
Just using my cell phone.
Now, I want to show you a portion of State's Exhibit 43, which is a communications chart. It has a number for Sarah Lemeries, 978-382-0279. And you actually prepared a report of the interview or the interactions that you had with Ms. Lemeries?
Yes, I did.
Is that the cell phone that you used to contact her at? The
Yes,
cell phone number?
yes, it is.
As part of your interactions with Sarah Lemeries, did she provide you with text messages that she had saved on her cell phone?
Yes, she did.
And how did she provide you with those text messages?
She just took a screenshot and texted it to me.
So I want to show you State's Exhibit 47. It may be difficult for you to, can you see it from there?
I can.
Oh, great. Are these the text messages that Ms. Lemeries sent to you?
Yes.
This is a screenshot of those text messages?
Yes.
And it shows two separate text message chains from Thursday?
Yes.
And the top one, it may be difficult for you to read. It says 2:37, and the bottom one says 2:42 on Thursday.
Yep, top one 12:37 p.m. and then the bottom one is 2:42 p.m.
So going back to State's Exhibit 43, which again is the communications chart that we just reviewed. Does it show two text messages between a cell phone corresponding to the defendant and Sarah Lemeries?
Yes.
And it has 12:37 and 2:42, and how does that match up to the times that we just went over?
It's accurate.
Going back to State's Exhibit 47, you read these text messages. First, we have at 12:37, hi, I have to make an employee Excel spreadsheet. What's your middle initial? And then Thursday, 2:42, we have 3 question marks, followed at 2:56 p.m. My sorry was driving. A. I'm sorry, I should have relayed that. We also have 2:56, a sent text message to Sarah Lemeries.
Correct.
Last knowing text message. Sorry was driving. A. After the lunch recess, we're going to be going into some bank records. From those bank records, do you know what the defendant's middle initial is?
A.
actually, Judge, the next topic is bank records, so this may be a good time to break for lunch.
I agree. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're just a couple minutes past noon, so if we could all be back here for 1 o'clock, we can resume then. Thank you very much. Remember to keep an open mind, not speak to anybody about the case or let anybody provide you information. Don't do any research, and so on. And let me know if anything comes up. Thank you.
All rise.
So I know I had chatted with counsel about jury instructions, and we're getting closer to the bewitching hour, so I just thought I'd remind you all. Okay?
Yeah, I reviewed it, I'm all set with those.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Your Honor, we just had one, I just had one.
Sure.
So, Your Honor, first, I apologize, I didn't write down the page number, but in the jury instructions, you mentioned about stipulation. I don't believe we have any stipulations in this case. We did agree to use the children's CAC interviews in lieu of the live testimony, but there wasn't any stipulation.
I agree.
And then on page 14, when you discuss first-degree murder, and then you go into discussing second-degree murder, it says a similar but less serious offense is different from a more serious crime. It requires a less serious mental state and a less serious act. In this case, the act is the same, so I just wasn't sure if maybe that should be changed a little bit.
Okay. I will look at that wording. I think my memory is that when I looked at it, because you add the verbiage of extreme indifference to the value of human life, it is different than a purposeful causing of death. So but I'm fine to, maybe I could say and/or, and then it solves that issue. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.